The cake or my stepfather's birthday had a joke written in icing. At least I have one good child. Everyone laughed except me. I stood up, raised my glass and said, "Let's drink to the last time you hear my voice." Then I left the only gift on the table, the key to my childhood home. The cake was perfect. White frosting, blue border, and the words, "At least I have a good child," written in red frosting right in the middle. At least I have a good child. Everyone laughed. My stepfather, Rick, threw his head back and enjoyed the moment. My mother covered her mouth and held back her laughter. My stepbrother, Jason, smiled and looked at me out of the corner of his eye. The guest friends of the family, a few neighbors smiled politely, some exchanging glances, sensing the tension but playing along. I didn't laugh. I just raised my glass, stood up, and let my voice cut through the room. "Let's drink to the last time you hear my voice." Silence. The kind of silence that hangs over the room like a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. Even the clinking of forks on plates stopped. I placed my gift on the table, small, simple, but heavy with meaning. A single key. Then I turned and walked out, leaving behind the house I grew up in and the people who had never considered me theirs. I had no plan, no bag to pack, no place to go. But I knew one thing: I was done being the laughingstock of my family. I didn't slam the door when I left. I just walked out, stepped onto the sidewalk and kept walking. The night air was cool and the laughter in the house had stopped. Maybe they were still sitting there looking for the key. Maybe my mom was trying to calm me down by pretending I was being dramatic. Maybe Rick was shaking his head and muttering something about how I was always difficult. I didn't care. I had $20 in my pocket, my cell phone, and nothing else. No plan, no safety net. Just the burden of a lifetime of being an extra piece in a family puzzle that never fit. I walked for a while, not thinking about where I was going, until I reached the bus stop at the edge of our neighborhood. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. No messages. No calls. Not even a half-hearted, "Where are you?" from my mom. It should have hurt. But it didn't. The last bus arrived, the doors hissed open. The driver looked at me like he was waiting for me to tell him where I was going. I didn't have one, so I just said the first thing that came to mind. "Downtown." He nodded and I got in, sinking into the back seat. The city lights blurred outside the window, and for the first time in years I felt something like relief. Downtown at night is no place to wander around without a plan. Bars full of drunken strangers, flickering neon signs, random shadowy figures watching me too closely. I walked purposefully as if I knew where I was going, even though I didn't. My phone buzzed. For a second, I thought that maybe, just maybe, someone from this house had finally taken care of me. I pulled it out. "Jason." I let it ring. Then I let it ring again when it rang back. A few minutes later a message appeared. Very mature. "You made Mom cry. Rick is angry. Are you happy now?" I stared at the screen. There was no apology. No "Are you okay?" Just guilt as usual. I started to type something back and then stopped. What was the point? I deleted the draft and put the phone in my pocket. A gust of wind brought the smell of rain and something fried. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since the cake, and now I wished I'd at least grabbed a plate before my dramatic exit. On the corner I spotted a diner, one of those places that hadn't changed since the 80s. Inside, a bored waitress wiped the counter, an old man drank coffee, and soft jazz played from a crackling speaker. I slipped into a booth. A few minutes later, the waitress put the menu in front of me. "Looks like you could use some coffee." I nodded. "And maybe the cheapest thing on the menu." She smiled, jotted something down in her notebook and walked away. I sat back and exhaled. No home. No plan. No regrets. At least not yet. The coffee was terrible, but it was hot, and for now it was enough. I ate slowly, stretching every piece of the greasy fried cheese I barely had enough money for. The diner was quiet, except for the occasional rumble from the kitchen and the low hum of the jazz station. I was halfway through my meal when someone slipped into the booth across from me. I looked up, already annoyed. Some guy, probably in his 20s, wearing a hoodie with tired eyes. He had the kind of face that didn't stand out, like someone you passed dozens of times on the street without noticing. At first he said nothing, just drummed his fingers on the table. Then he nodded toward my plate. "Will you finish?" I raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" He smiled, but there was something behind that smile, something sharp, like he wasn't just kidding. I looked around. The old man behind the counter was gone, the waitress was in the back of the room, and I suddenly realized how empty the place had become. I pushed my plate over to him. He grabbed the sandwich and took a bite as if he hadn't eaten in days. "Thanks," he mumbled, his mouth full. I should have asked him to leave, but instead I asked, "Are you homeless?" He snorted. "You?" I hesitated. Something like that. He nodded as if he understood. Maybe he did. We just sat there for a while, him finishing my food, me sipping my bad coffee. Then he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and leaned forward slightly. Do you need to go somewhere? I shook my head. He smiled again, but this time it was more like a test. I know a place. It's safe. Warmer than here. Every part of me told me this was a bad idea. But then I thought about the alternative, wandering the streets alone, sleeping at a bus stop, waiting for a text from someone who didn't care. So when he got up and headed for the door, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I followed him. We walked in silence for a while, the city buzzing around us. I stayed a few steps behind him, keeping my guard up. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should have just found a bench somewhere and waited for the sun to come up. But I kept walking. After a few blocks, he turned into a side street and then into an alley. I hesitated. He turned, saw me standing there, and smiled. Relax. I'm not going to rob you. It doesn't look like you have much anyway. He was right. I followed him through the rusty chain-link gate into the warehouse. It looked abandoned, boarded-up windows, graffiti on the walls, but when he knocked 3 times on the metal side door, something moved inside. A second later, the door creaked open. There was a girl, maybe my age, maybe a little older. Tousled hair, a big hooded jacket, watchful eyes that looked from him to me. Who is it? She asked. A homeless man, he replied. She looked at me again, then sighed and stepped aside. It was warmer inside than I had expected. The smell of old wood and dust was mixed with something slightly sweet, maybe incense, maybe something else. Several people were scattered about. A man flipping through a tattered magazine, someone curled up on a makeshift bed, and another person stirring a cauldron on a portable stove. A place to hide. A place to sleep. Whatever it was better than the street. The guy led me to a corner where several sleeping bags were piled up. You can spend the night here. No weird shit, no stealing, and don't piss anyone off. Got it? I nodded. Good. He stretched and then flopped down on one of the sleeping bags like he'd done it hundreds of times. My name's Caleb, by the way. I hesitated before answering. Something about this place and him made me feel like I shouldn't tell him my real name. So I didn't. Alex, I lied. Caleb just smiled as if he knew. But he didn't challenge me. Get some sleep, Alex, he said, closing his eyes. I sat there for a while, listening to the low hum of the warehouse, wondering if I had gotten into something I wasn't ready for. But for the first time since I'd left this house, I didn't feel completely alone. I awoke to the sound of voices, soft whispers, rare laughter. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I saw the ceiling of the warehouse, felt the rough sleeping bag beneath me, and everything came back. Caleb was gone, but his sleeping bag was still there. On the other side of the room, the girl from yesterday was sitting cross-legged on a milk crate, eating instant noodles out of a styrofoam cup. She noticed me looking at her. You're snoring, she said. I sat up and rubbed my face. I'm sorry. She shrugged. Better than the guy that slept here. He talked in his sleep. That's scary shit too. I didn't ask what happened to him. The door creaked open and Caleb came in. He was holding a plastic bag in one hand and a half-eaten granola bar in the other. He tossed the bag in my direction. Breakfast. Inside was an apple, a bottle of water, and a sandwich with dressing. Not exactly a feast, but I wasn't going to complain. As I ate, Caleb sat across from me and watched. Then, out of the blue, he asked, How long are you planning on staying? I froze in mid-sentence. I don't know. He nodded as if he expected that answer. Then he leaned forward slightly. Are you looking for a job? Something in the way he said it made me stop. What kind of job? Caleb smiled. Something that pays cash. No questions asked. The girl on the milk crate made a sound, half warning, half amusement. Don't drag her into your shit, Caleb. I looked between them. What shit? Caleb didn't answer right away. He just pulled something out of his sweatshirt pocket and put it on top of the box. A stack of bills, thick enough to make my stomach turn. Easy job, he said. Moving a package from one place to another. No heavy stuff, no cops, no drama. Are you in or out? I stared at the money. I could have walked away. Continued to sleep on the floor, hoping something better would happen. Or I could say yes and then realize it was a mistake. I picked up the water bottle, screwed the top on, and took a slow sip. Then I said, Tell me more. Caleb smiled as if he already knew my answer. He sat back and stretched out his arms. It's simple. You take the package, you hand it over. No questions, no nonsense. You do it right, you get the money. If you do it wrong, you get the money. He left the sentence hanging. The girl shook her head and muttered, Bad idea. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should have left the warehouse and found something else. But I didn't. When's the first job? I asked. Caleb's smile widened. Tonight. And so, a few hours later, I found myself walking 2 blocks with a small, nondescript envelope tucked into my jacket. Caleb didn't tell me what was inside, and I didn't ask. My only job was to hand it to the guy at the laundromat, collect the money, and walk away. It should have been easy. But the moment I saw this guy, about 40 years old, twitchy, constantly looking over his shoulder, I knew something was wrong. I hesitated just for a second. And in that second, everything went wrong. A car screeched to a halt behind me. The door opened. 2 guys jumped out, moving fast. One grabbed my arm. I pulled away, trying to get out. The twitchy guy panicked and ran, the envelope still in my jacket. I heard Caleb's voice in my mind. You do it right, you get the money. Do it wrong? I ran. I cut through the alley. I jumped over the fence. I hit the pavement hard on the other side, but I kept running. I didn't stop until I'd run a few blocks, my heart pounding against my ribs. When I finally checked my phone, there was a message from Caleb. Where are you? I didn't answer. I found a bench and sat down, my hands shaking. I pulled the envelope from my jacket and stared at it. Whatever was inside was not worth my life. I made a decision. I went to the first police station I came to and put the envelope on the desk. The officer behind the desk looked at me confused. What is this? I took a deep breath. Something I don't want to be a part of. I never went back to the camp. I never saw Caleb or anyone else again. A week later, my mother finally wrote to me, You understood everything. Come back home. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing. I was never coming back.